Welcome and thank you for joining us for Workday Chats. I'm Melissa Kullander and I'm going to be your host for today's discussion. Now, we want you to also participate. So if you have some thoughts you'd like to share, use that comment box below. Okay, well, let's get started. I can't wait to introduce our three wonderful guests. First is Tom Willman, Principal Global Practice Leader, Finance Advisory for the Hackett Group.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Tom. And MaryAnne StaRosa, she's the Director of Finance Technology Programs at Healthfirst.
Hey, Melissa. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for joining. And also Craig Barattin, he's the Vice President of Finance and Controller for Healthfirst.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks again for having us today. We're very excited to participate.
Well, that's so great. In fact, again, I'm really excited about today's topic. And I'm going to start out by just kind of setting the stage for us. Financial leaders are under a lot of pressure these days. They're having to deal with being very agile, providing real-time data, trying to determine, taking information and making decisions on this, and guiding the business through some turbulent times. So today's discussion, what's really exciting about it is that all of you are going to help us provide some real tangible strategies to move beyond the on-prem ERP to make faster, better decision-making in this changing world. So are you guys ready to get going?
Ready.
Let's do it.
All right, sounds fantastic. So one of the questions that I have, and I'm going to pick on Tom first. How about that, Tom?
Sure.
Okay, great. We talk about digital transformation. So I have two questions for you. First, what does digital transformation mean to you? And, what is top of mind for you as you and others are going through this digital transformation?
Sure. And I'm glad you started with the first question, because I think it is important to understand what does digital transformation really mean? Because, in my experience, digital transformation gets used synonymously with digitalization, and they're actually very different. Digitalization is about automating what we do today. It's focused on efficiency, can be very incremental in nature. A good example is, an organization automates their AP process by, scanning paper invoices, maybe using workflow to get the approvals that they need, and then maybe paying by check or even paying electronically. But, so we've made some incremental improvements to that process, but it's still an AP invoicing process. We really haven't transformed what we do. But digital transformation is really about changing the way we work. And, if you look beyond finance, even changing whole business models. But a good example in finance, I use the forecasting process as an example where we're seeing organizations now, move away from, a very rigorous, detailed bottoms-up process to much more of a tops-down process that's enabled by driver-based models and predictive analytics, to where it's almost a touchless process. So we've freed up our finance business partners from, having to crank the forecasting engine, 2 or 3 weeks out of a month. And now they're spending much more time working with sales and marketing and operations on, how do we drive better revenue growth or profitability, cash flow. So it's really about driving business value and agility. And the good news is I think companies are starting to differentiate between the two. In fact, in our latest key issues research, finance organizations rated accelerating finance's digital transformation as the number one priority for 2022. And so we're actively seeing, the process and technology work required to make that digital transformation happen, which is pretty exciting. And we're starting to see them kind of knock down some of the barriers that, historically have prevented us from being successful. So they're addressing underlying process and technology complexity. They're looking at prioritization and trying to avoid their organizations from getting overcommitted. So those are some of the things, that I would ask companies to think about as they evaluate, launching a digital transformation or even, evaluating what they're currently doing.
Well, thanks, Tom. And gosh, Craig, I was just thinking, do you agree with that definition? And what do you think about the priorities that he talked about?
Yeah, I think Tom is spot on some of the comments that he's made around digital transformation and really just distinguishing that between from digitalization, right? I think, for us at Healthfirst, we have an overall enterprise digital transformation strategy. And from a finance perspective, we are really focused on ensuring that we are part of that process and that we are making decisions that will support the overall organizational strategy and at the same time create efficiencies and opportunities within the finance platform that supports the organization. Because the needs of the organization are changing, and we need to be able to support those needs in that changing environment. And I think, having the flexibility to do that as we grow and providing the right tools to our employees to support that is really important, especially as finance shifts to, in my opinion, more of a area that supports the needs of the business than just the area that closes the books every month, right? There's different needs that organizations have now. And, making sure that you're looking at those areas of opportunity from a digital transformation perspective are really important to be able to support the future needs of the organization. And we've really made it a focused effort at Healthfirst to try to accomplish that and get on the path, because it's a journey. It's not a you don't do it once and then you go back to your daily routine. It's a journey that you have to make a commitment to as an organization. But the benefits are certainly significant. At least from our standpoint, we feel they've been very significant, and as we continue to move on that journey.
Well, thank you, Craig. And MaryAnne, from your vantage point, how do you see this?
Yeah, I think Tom and Craig touched on a lot of great points. So for me, digital transformation means how do we really take all of our employees to our journey, right? Technology, as we know, it drives changes, and we are challenging our people every day in new ways of working through innovation while really managing our costs and have better technology and user experience to their day-to-day operations, which ultimately increases our productivity, efficiency, unlocking their time as well as capacity.
Well, thank you, MaryAnne. And I'm just trying to, think back through Workday's journey, right? And we're still on that journey. I don't think we'll ever be off a journey because it is the process. It's not just getting to a destination and you're done. But I think, Tom, what you had mentioned about this idea of you have to look at your processes, right? And the way you're doing things and tools. I think obviously I'm here at Workday and I feel like we have the right tools, but it's also making sure that your people and processes, are modified and adapted to that change too. If you've got the right tools that are flexible, you've got to change the way you do things, right? And I think if any company, as you evolve, Workday is one that's rapidly growing. Things that you did when we were much smaller are not the things and the way we want to do work going forward. So I don't know, I think that resonated with me, but I think it's a great segue to really doing work differently to our next topic. And Tom, it was some of the research I was looking at. Your Hackett group found in one of their studies that 82% of finance teams are expected to be hybrid in 2022, right? I think we all kind of felt that. Maybe this puts it down in numbers. As finance people, we want to actually see something concrete, right? But the point is moving beyond ERP and the cloud becomes more important if we're all hybrid. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear from all of you is how moving to the cloud and your tools and this journey of being hybrid, how's that helped you to adapt to new ways of working? And maybe I'll pick on you, Tom, again.
Yeah, sure. And I think the hybrid work model, it is here to stay. The research certainly supports that. And I just know anecdotally in speaking with my clients, they're continuing to evolve that model. I don't know many that, have reached their kind of final version of what that work model looks like. But one thing that is clear is that, one of the key enablers to being able to support that hybrid work model is real-time access to the tools that we need, real-time access to data and information. And so one of the major strategies that we've seen clients adopt to enable that long-term is migrating their ERP and core systems to the cloud. In fact, I'll reference the same key issues research that I talked about in the first question. The fastest growing technology category in terms of adoption is, cloud-based core finance application suites, followed pretty closely behind by advanced analytics. So hence my comment about digital transformation before, and data visualization. So helping our organizations interact with data on a real-time basis and helping tell the story behind that. So again, a lot of the technology and process work required, to make sure that hybrid work model is enabled and can be sustained, is already underway. And quite honestly, I think the hardest part, that's still to come is the people side of the equation, and getting people accustomed to, different work schedules, being in the office, being at home, and figuring out how to manage their teams that are working in different locations.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. I'm thinking, MaryAnne, from your perspective, how have you seen, or how's your journey been, and where do you see it going next?
A great question, Melissa. Thank you for that. I think that for the most part, it's really setting real high standard with our team, and also being very deliberate and strategic with our path forward, making sure that we are always continuously looking to improve and leveraging all of the lessons that we've learned from the past, as well as making sure that we are not overcommitting and not delivering based on what we have committed, right? So I think for the most part, having also a great partnership with our stakeholders and leadership from a communication and collaboration standpoint is a key recipe for our success as well.
That's great. And I don't know, anything to add, Craig, kind of?
Yeah, I would just add that to Tom's point, I think the hybrid work model is here to stay. And, we're experiencing that here at Healthfirst as well. And, for us, we've benefited significantly from having our core finance platform in the cloud throughout the challenging times of the last 2+ years, and it really allowed us to be very flexible and to MaryAnne's point, to still be able to deliver on a lot of things that we wanted to do, even in a hybrid environment. And I think we've been able to model what we think the future, looks like relative to that hybrid model quite well, because of some of the steps that we've taken when it comes to how we operate our platform. So I think there are certainly benefits. We really didn't skip a beat during the pandemic, and I think that was really strong information, strong evidence for our leadership to show that we set ourselves up for success, and that we have options on how we want to operate moving forward that could provide, continue to provide enhanced benefits to our staff and, and all the users of the tools that we're managing.
Yeah, and it kind of is a perfect segue to another Hackett study, Craig. I'm going to kind of take your thoughts that you just said and tie it into another study that the Hackett group had. And they said that 77% of all firms said that they're making finance a strategic advisor to the business as the top priority. So I think for sure, as finance professionals, none of us want to do the routine, there's some necessary evils in our job, but right. All of us really want to be that strategic advisor to the business. And of course, that's what the study says. It relies on that. But the question really for you is, with this new working environment, how are you able to do that? How are you able to help your teams take all this data and have some meaningful, actionable insights for the business?
So what we've done, what we've tried to do, and what we continue to do is really create a lot of self-service tools for our users, right? So we've created specific reporting, portfolios, dashboards, access to information in a self-service manner from the executive level all the way down to your staff individuals. that, based on security roles and things like that, but it allows them to get access to information on a more real-time basis, so that they can take that information, analyze it, make decisions based off of it. And we did that all while getting feedback from those folks to make sure that the right information was available in the right format for them. So it's an ever changing and evolving, set of reports and data, but at a minimum, it gives people more access to real-time information in a much better manner than we had historically. So it will continue to evolve. But to your point, Melissa, really, we realize that finance is becoming more of a strategic partner to the business than it ever was before. So we need to be able to support that. And so we have to look for ways to continuously evolve and become more efficient in order to do that. So that's a big focus area for us. A lot of our continuous development and things that we look to do from an enhancement perspective are focused on that, like MaryAnne had described earlier. So we'll continue to look to refine those areas as we grow and evolve.
Well, that's great. And I'm going to point towards Tom here. This is your study and research. What are some other insights that you can maybe bring to light as a result of this?
Sure. No, and I love the idea of self-service and arming, your stakeholders with direct access to information, so they don't have to rely on finance to put that information together, because it allows them to respond more quickly to what's happening and what information they're consuming, but it also creates capacity for finance professionals to really be advising the business on what do we do about, what we're seeing in this management information. What does this mean from a revenue growth strategy perspective, or in, today's environment, how do we ensure we can improve our profitability and cash flow, in an environment where we expect things to slow down in certain industries. So that's fantastic. But I think there are a couple of things, that finance organizations can do that I think are really important to being able to provide that self-service capability, or even just providing real-time information to finance itself. And that's really about establishing and creating an enterprise data model, so everybody's kind of working within the same language across the business. Creating a single source of truth, so everybody understands where information is coming from and accepts that that's where information should be coming from. So we're no longer debating about, where did your information come from? Mine says something different from over here. And then I think, there are a couple of things from a people perspective and organization perspective that are important to enable this as well. And that's, really defining the right interaction model between finance and the business to make sure finance is getting a seat at the table and able to take advantage of the seat that they do have at the table, and making sure we've got the right individuals in those roles with the appropriate, business acumen, analytical skills, and even intellectual curiosity, to help businesses understand or guide them as they're making decisions.
Well, thanks,
Melissa,
Tom.
if I can just interject one other comment here, I think it's important. I think there's also a component of sort of change management that has to be part of this as well, because it's a new way of thinking for a lot of folks. So ensuring that you provide them, it's one thing to provide them the information, but they need to know how to access it, how to use it properly. So there's a component of that you need to be cognizant of as you go on this journey. Because just making the information available doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be used correctly or appropriately. So I think we've tried to focus on, that aspect of this process as well as best we can, because there is some behavior change that needs to take place as well in order to be really successful on this journey.
Yeah, and I think that we call it the muscle memory, right? So many years we spend all of our time just gathering everything that it just, when we don't have to do that, and now we're supposed to study and provide insights, we have to kind of waken up those muscles again to remind them that we're in a different mode now, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, MaryAnne, have you experienced that, or how do you see this from your perspective?
I think Tom and Craig touched on a lot of great points. Really upskilling our team members to ensure that we scale over time. And also from a development standpoint and strategic standpoint, that we need to really think through about making complex processes more simple to end users.
Yeah, all I'll say is amen, right? I think we all want things much simpler. We already have a very complex life, but well, gosh, time is flying. We've had a great little chat here, and but I want to make sure that we don't leave before I kind of get your final thoughts about what are one key thing that you could provide advice to the audience today. And I'll start with you, MaryAnne. What is that one takeaway that you want to make sure you leave this audience with?
I think it's all about making sure that folks that's on the table is kept aware and in the know with everything that's happening down the road, right? From a path forward, road mapping standpoint, and making sure that everyone is in alignment from a strategic and initiative standpoint, just so that no one is caught off guard. And as a result of that, your leadership and everybody will be in support of the initiatives that you're trying to put forth.
Okay. And Craig, what are your final thoughts?
I think, finance needs to be flexible. They need to be, part of this digital transformation process. For whether it's from your organizational perspective or just from a finance perspective, and communication and collaboration become very important across the areas of the organization, to ensure success. So I think those are really some of the key, takeaways from our experience that I would certainly, want to share with folks who are listening today.
Okay. And Tom, do you want to take us home?
Sure. So I think if I could impart one piece of advice, it can be so tempting when you read what's going on in the world, historic levels of inflation, supply chains still disrupted, geopolitical instability in certain parts of the world, potential regulatory changes that are going to impact, our organizations broadly, but finance as well. If you think about something like ESG and the potential for regulatory reporting requirements, it can be so easy to, kind of hunker down and either stop or slow down the work that we're doing to digitally transform. And my advice would be don't stop. Don't resist the temptation, because the capabilities that you're going to develop through this digital transformation are the ones that are really going to position your organizations well to sustain through what might be coming in the next few quarters, but really positioning you for strategic growth in the long term. So whatever you need to do to kind of protect your ability to invest and continue on the journey, on a digital transformation journey, I would recommend they do that.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think so many times we're all hunkering down to weather the storm or deal with the day-to-day things. I think as finance professionals, we're just I think we're built that way. But I think one of the most important things is building that capability in now so that you come out of the storm stronger. And not everyone does. They weather the storm and they fall apart. And I think we as finance professionals need to come out stronger. And that's the real challenge. But again, I want to thank all of you guys, MaryAnne, Craig, and Tom. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with all of us today. We really welcome any new ideas, I think. And I want to thank you, the audience here, for joining us today. And I want to just encourage you guys, if you are interested in deep diving into the Hackett Group's findings on going beyond ERP, make sure that you check out the link in the comments. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.